This story was sent to me a few days ago. I'll read it to you exactly as it was written. I never thought I'd be writing to a channel like yours, but I need to get this story out before I disappear. It all started when a former colleague handed me a matte black membership card with no logo. He told me it was the only way to buy authentic luxury brands without the insane markup. Following the instructions he gave me, I drove out to a decaying industrial district on the outskirts of town. The GPS led me to a massive, windowless warehouse that looked like it hadn't been used in decades. I found the side entrance and was immediately met by a security guard who looked like he belonged in a private militia. He didn't say a single word. He just held out a scanner for my card. The heavy steel door buzzed open, revealing a staircase that descended deep into the basement. As I walked down, the smell of damp concrete was replaced by the expensive scent of sandalwood and polished leather. The basement was a complete shock. It looked like a boutique you would find on Rodeo Drive. Soft spotlights illuminated rows of Louis Vuitton bags, Chanel clutches, and Gucci belts. Everything was organized with clinical precision on minimalist glass shelves. Standing behind a white marble counter was the manager, a man whose suit was as sharp as his gaze. He didn't welcome me. He just nodded, as if he were appraising my net worth. I began to look at the price tags, and my jaw nearly hit the floor. A Louis Vuitton Neverfull, which retails for over $2,000, was marked at just $600. I checked the stitching and the hardware, looking for any sign of a knockoff. It was perfect, authentic, high-quality leather that had clearly been used, but only slightly. The shop was unnervingly quiet, with no music and no other customers in sight. The manager finally spoke, telling me in a cold, dry voice that all sales were cash only. He also warned me that taking photos or videos inside the shop would result in an immediate lifetime ban. I felt a strange shiver down my spine, but the lure of the bargain was too strong to ignore. I didn't realize then that the low prices weren't a discount. They were a lure. I spent nearly an hour browsing the shelves before I finally settled on a classic Prada briefcase. It was in beautiful condition, and the price tag was only $500 in cash. I walked up to the marble counter and placed the bills down, feeling a rush of adrenaline from the deal. The manager took the money and counted it with the speed of a professional bank teller. He placed the briefcase into a plain, heavy-duty brown paper bag with no markings at all. "We prefer to keep our clients' purchases discreet," he said without looking up from his desk. As he handed me the bag, he leaned in slightly and mentioned their special procurement service. He told me that if there was a specific item I wanted but didn't see in the store, they could find it. "Anything within the mid-range luxury tier," he explained, "as long as it's a common model." He made a bold claim that they could source any requested item and have it ready within 10 days. I thought about my sister, who had been heartbroken after losing a specific, discontinued Chanel wallet years ago. I described the exact model and the unique hardware color to the manager. He didn't search a computer database. Instead, he opened a thick, leather-bound ledger and wrote it down by hand. He told me to expect a text message within the week once the item had been secured. I thanked him and headed back up the concrete stairs, feeling like I had found a secret gold mine. Once I got back to my car, I pulled the briefcase out to admire it under the dome light. I noticed a tiny, dried water spot near the handle that I hadn't seen in the shop's dim lighting. It didn't bother me much, considering I had saved over $1,000 on the purchase. I drove home with a sense of triumph, already imagining the look on my sister's face. I had no idea that by writing that request in his ledger, I had essentially signed a contract for a crime. For the next few days, I couldn't stop checking my phone every 10 minutes. I kept wondering how they could possibly find a discontinued wallet so quickly. On the morning of the 6th day, a message finally arrived from an unknown number. It was just a high-resolution photo of the exact Chanel wallet I had described. The text underneath simply said, "Item secured, $400, ready for pickup." I drove back to that desolate warehouse the very same evening. This time, the guard didn't even wait for me to show my card. He just waved me through. The basement felt even colder than before, despite the warm, expensive lighting. The manager was waiting for me, holding a black velvet tray in his gloved hands. He placed the tray on the counter, and there it was, the wallet, in perfect condition. I picked it up to inspect the gold hardware, and a strange sensation washed over me. The leather felt unnervingly warm, as if someone had just been holding it in their pocket minutes ago. It didn't have the cold, stiff feel of an item that had been sitting on a shelf for weeks. I ignored the feeling and counted out the $400 onto the marble counter. The manager watched me with a faint, predatory smile that never reached his eyes. "We never miss a deadline," he said, his voice sounding more like a threat than a promise. He reminded me that their 10-day guarantee was a point of absolute pride for their organization. I tucked the wallet into my pocket, thanked him quickly, and hurried toward the exit. As I walked up the stairs, I noticed the manager didn't go back to his ledger. He just stood there, watching me leave. I felt a sudden urge to run, but I forced myself to walk at a normal pace until I reached my car. When I got home, I sat down at my desk and turned on the bright reading lamp. I wanted to give the wallet a final, thorough inspection before I wrapped it up for my sister. As I opened the main compartment, a wave of heavy floral perfume filled the air. It was so strong that it made my eyes water for a second. It wasn't the scent of a luxury store. It was the scent of a person. I reached into the small coin pocket to check the lining for any tears. My fingers brushed against something small and thin, stuck deep in the corner. I pulled out a tiny crumpled piece of paper. It was a dry cleaning receipt. The date on the slip was from only 3 days ago. Even more disturbing was the address printed at the top, which was a suburban neighborhood just 10 minutes away. A cold pit formed in my stomach as I stared at that slip of paper. I opened my laptop and typed the address into a local news search engine. I scrolled through the headlines from the past 72 hours until my heart stopped. There was an article about a violent mugging that happened in a grocery store parking lot. The victim had been a middle-aged woman who was attacked while loading her car. The report specifically mentioned that her purse was stolen, including a rare, discontinued designer wallet. I looked at the photo in the news article, and then back at the wallet on my desk. The gold hardware had a very specific, circular scratch that matched the description perfectly. This wasn't just a coincidence. This was the exact same item. The realization hit me like a physical blow to the chest. The shop didn't have a supplier or a warehouse of used goods. They were tracking people down and stealing from them to fulfill my order. I couldn't sleep that night, staring at the screen of my laptop until my eyes burned. I opened the shop's member-only website to look at their new arrivals section. I began a systematic search, matching every item added in the last month to local police reports. I cross-referenced the dates of the uploads with the dates of reported thefts in the tri-state area. The results were terrifyingly consistent. A Louis Vuitton handbag appeared on the site exactly 48 hours after a car window was smashed at a local mall. A gold Rolex Submariner was listed for sale just 1 day after a reported home invasion in a wealthy zip code. Every single mid-tier luxury item in their inventory had a corresponding victim in the real world. I realized that the shop wasn't just selling stolen goods. They were a brokerage for violence. The 10-day guarantee wasn't about shipping or logistics from a distant warehouse. It was the amount of time they gave their collectors. Time to stalk and rob a specific person who owned what was requested. If a member wanted a specific item, the shop would find a local owner and procure it. I checked social media community groups and found posts from frantic owners describing the very items I saw on the site. These victims weren't multimillionaires with private security. They were ordinary people who had saved up for one nice thing. My stomach turned as I looked at the Prada briefcase I had bought earlier that week. I wondered whose life had been turned upside down so I could save a few $100s. The logic of the business model was perfect, efficient, and absolutely heartless. They didn't need to keep a massive inventory because the entire city was their warehouse. I knew right then that I couldn't keep this membership or stay silent anymore. I decided I would go back one last time the next day to cancel my membership and cut all ties. I drove back to the industrial district the next evening, my hands trembling on the steering wheel. The heavy silence of the warehouse felt more oppressive than usual as I approached the side entrance. The security guard didn't even look at my card this time. He just nodded me through with a knowing smirk. I walked down those concrete stairs, the expensive scent of the shop now making me feel physically ill. The manager was at his usual spot, meticulously polishing a row of designer belts. He didn't look up immediately, letting the sound of my footsteps echo through the empty room. When he finally met my eyes, his expression was completely void of any human warmth. I cleared my throat and told him as calmly as I could that I wanted to terminate my membership. He stopped polishing the leather and stood perfectly still for several long, agonizing seconds. He asked me in that dry, clinical voice if there had been an issue with the quality of the items I received. I felt a surge of panic, wondering if he could see the guilt and fear written all over my face. I lied and told him that I had been offered a job overseas and was moving out of the country in 2 days. He didn't seem convinced, but he reached under the marble counter and pulled out a thick, black 3-ring binder. Just as he was about to open it, a phone began to ring loudly in the small office behind the counter. He let out a frustrated sigh, placed the binder down in front of me, and stepped into the back room to answer it. He left the binder wide open on the counter, right under the bright spotlight of the display area. My heart was pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird as I looked down at the pages. I knew I shouldn't look, but my curiosity was stronger than my fear at that moment. I reached out and slowly turned the first page. And what I saw made the blood drain from my face. It wasn't a list of inventory or prices. It was something far more sinister. The binder wasn't the ledger. It was a catalog of unsuspecting victims. Each page featured high-resolution surveillance photos of people in public settings. I saw a woman sitting at a sidewalk cafe with her Louis Vuitton bag resting on the chair next to her. There were red circles drawn around the bag and her wrist, where a gold watch was clearly visible. On the side of the photo, someone had written down her daily commute and her home address in neat, cursive script. I flipped to the next page and saw a man walking his dog while wearing a specific designer jacket. Below his photo was a handwritten checklist of his home security details and the best time to approach him. My breath hitched when I finally found the page for the woman who owned the Chanel wallet. There was a candid photo of her at the grocery store, taken from a distance across the parking lot. Written in the margin was the exact date I had placed my request with the manager. It wasn't just a suspicion anymore. It was a documented execution of a targeted crime. These weren't suppliers or liquidators. They were professional stalkers and thieves. I kept flipping through the pages, my hands shaking so hard the paper began to rattle. I found a section labeled Pending Orders, with several names and addresses highlighted in bright yellow. Then, I saw a familiar set of notes at the top of a new page. It listed the Prada briefcase I had bought during my very first visit. There was a photo of a young professional man walking into an office building, completely unaware he was being watched. Every item in this store was tied to a face, a routine, and a violent encounter. The shop was a marketplace for stolen lives, and I had been one of their primary financiers. I felt a wave of nausea hit me as I stared at the clinical notes of the thefts. I heard the manager's voice in the back room getting louder, indicating the phone call was ending. I quickly flipped the pages back to the cancellation form, trying to look as if I hadn't moved an inch. My mind was racing, wondering how many people were currently being followed because of a member's request. I realized then that this binder was the most dangerous object I had ever held in my hands. I just needed to get my signature and get out of that basement before I became the next face in his folder. I heard the heavy click of the phone being hung up in the back office. I barely managed to pull my hand away from the binder before the manager stepped back into the room. He walked slowly toward the counter, his eyes fixed directly on my face. I tried to maintain a neutral expression, but I could feel the cold sweat beads forming on my forehead. The manager looked at the binder, then back at me, his gaze lingering on my trembling hands. He didn't say anything for a moment, just picked up a silver pen and began signing my cancellation form. "It's a shame to see such a loyal member leave us so soon," he said, his voice dropping an octave. He slid the yellow carbon copy of the form across the cold marble toward me. I reached for it, wanting to leave immediately, but he placed his hand on top of the paper to stop me. "I should remind you that our records are kept for 5 years, even for inactive members," he stated flatly. He leaned forward, his face just inches from mine, and I could smell the faint scent of menthol on his breath. "We have your home address on file for administrative purposes, so there's no need to update us if you move." My heart skipped a beat when he mentioned my home address. It wasn't a helpful reminder. It was a clear and calculated threat. He let go of the paper and stood up straight, smoothing out the wrinkles in his expensive suit. "Once someone understands the true value of our inventory, they become part of the system," he added with a thin smile. I grabbed the paper, mumbled a quick thank you, and turned toward the stairs as fast as my legs would carry me. I didn't look back, but I could feel his eyes burning a hole in the back of my head. As I reached the heavy steel door at the top of the stairs, I heard the sharp crackle of static from a radio. "Black sedan. Get a clear shot of the driver and the plate," I heard the manager say into his device. I practically threw myself into my car and jammed the key into the ignition. The engine roared to life, and I tore out of the parking lot without looking at the security guard. I checked my rearview mirror every 3 seconds, expecting to see headlights behind me at any moment. I was no longer a customer to them. I was a loose end that needed to be monitored. I didn't stop until I was inside my house, with the deadbolt clicked into place. I walked around the living room, closing every single curtain and checking the locks on the windows twice. My heart was still racing, and my hands wouldn't stop shaking as I sat on the edge of my bed. I looked over at my closet, where my expensive clothes and watches were stored in neat rows. Suddenly, I didn't see luxury items anymore. I saw targets. I realized that if the shop targets average people who own nice things, then I was the perfect mark. I pulled out my phone and opened my Instagram profile, scrolling through my own photos with a sense of dread. There I was, wearing my Rolex in a photo at a local park, and the Prada briefcase at my favorite cafe. I had basically provided the shop with a map and a catalog of my most valuable possessions. I was exactly like the people in that black binder, just waiting for someone to circle my face in red. The manager knew where I lived, what I owned, and might have known that I knew their secret. I stood up and walked to the front window, peeking through a tiny gap in the heavy curtains. At the end of my driveway, a dark sedan was idling with its lights turned off. I saw a sudden flash of light from inside the car, the unmistakable glint of a long camera lens. Someone was out there, taking photos of my house and recording my movements just like the entries in the binder. I wasn't a member anymore. I had been officially moved to the procurement list. They weren't just watching me to see if I would talk to the police. They were appraising me. Every designer logo in my house was now a beacon for a professional thief. I realized that as long as I owned those items, I would never be safe in my own home again. I had to get rid of them, all of them, before the 10-day clock started ticking for me. I ran to the kitchen and grabbed a roll of the thickest, blackest trash bags I could find. I went to my closet and began tearing my designer clothes off their hangers with a manic energy. The Prada briefcase, the watches, the silk ties. Everything went into the bags without hesitation. I even threw in the Chanel wallet, feeling a surge of disgust as my fingers touched the warm leather. I couldn't just throw them in my own bin. That would be like leaving a breadcrumb trail to my front door. I didn't dare use my car, knowing they had already photographed my license plate and likely tracked my movements. Instead, I waited until the early hours of the morning when the street was at its quietest. I slipped out the back fence, carrying the heavy bags through the shadows of my neighbors' yards. I walked for over 3 miles, avoiding the main roads and any streetlights that might catch my face. I finally found a massive, rusted dumpster behind a greasy diner in a completely different district. I shoved the bags deep into the bottom, covering them with bags of rotting food and stinking waste. I stood there for a moment in the cold air, feeling lighter than I had in weeks. I walked back home wearing a plain $5 hoodie and a pair of generic sneakers from a grocery store. As soon as I got inside, I sat at my computer and began the long process of deleting every single photo of myself online. I scrubbed my social media accounts until there was no trace of the man who used to care about status symbols. When the sun came up, I peeked through the curtains and saw that the dark sedan was finally gone. But I knew better than to think I was truly safe just because the car had moved. My address is still in that black binder, and the manager is not the type of man to forget a face. I'm packing my essentials into plain cardboard boxes today. But I don't know if it's because I'm leaving or because I feel like I'm already late. I keep thinking about that black binder and wondering whether removing myself from the pages was ever an option. Or if my name was written in ink long before I saw it. The sedan is gone, my closets are empty, and there's nothing left in this apartment that would be worth stealing. Still, every sound outside makes me hesitate. I don't know if getting rid of the thing saved me, or if all I did was confirm that I understood how the system works. And if understanding was the real threshold, then it may not matter where I go next. I haven't been contacted again, but I don't think that means I've been forgotten.